Hello, everybody. Welcome back to TMR's Master Advisor. Today is June 20th, 2024, which is just about halfway through 2024, which seems pretty wild to me. This is episode number 93. We're really excited to have Marguerite Scully back here to talk about matching luxury clients with the perfect vacation. Margaret was here earlier this year where we previously spoke about personalization. We'll revisit some of that. We'll talk about qualifying clients, FIT cruises. We have a whole lot lined up. But I do have a few announcements to make before we get started. And then I do want to introduce our sponsor for today's episode. Um, so as always, just a couple of quick ones on the Zoom. It's if you want to switch into speaker view, that's going to be the best way to watch today's episode. And then the chat on the bottom right, we'll have it open as we go along today. We'll be taking some questions, some comments. You might have to click on the three dots on your Zoom to open up the chat, but it's open, it's there, it's live. If you have any concerns, anything we would want to bring up in the discussion, please don't be shy. Go ahead and drop it in there. Okay, so I want to thank everyone for coming out a couple of weeks ago with Shayla Northcutt, where we spoke about hiring, we spoke about ICs, how to operate a luxury travel agency when it comes to staffing, things like that. That was a great session. I'm always going to plug our YouTube, which hosts that content. So if you do want to check out the episode, the link to the YouTube is in the chat now. Again, that has all of our content on here. If you want to watch the previous episode with Marguerite, that's on there too. Go ahead, go over there, like the video, subscribe. That always helps us to keep building this community. So we're just about to hit summer break with MasterAdvisor 2. We are trying to plan another episode for July, the middle of July. We do not have that confirmed right now. What we do have confirmed is an August 1st episode, which we're really, really excited to do. That's going to be specifically with the travel advisor from Cruise Planners, actually, who has built this massive audience on YouTube. We're going to talk about building an audience on YouTube, talking about video, connecting with clients, things like that. It's something we haven't done yet. And again, we've done almost 100 of these. So a new one, we're really excited about August 1st. If you want to register for that one, that's in the chat now too. But keep your eye out for the July date. Otherwise, we hope to see everyone back here August 1st to do the YouTube one, which again, we're so excited for. Okay. All right, so with that all out of the way, I'm really excited to introduce our sponsor for today's episode. We're here with Kathy Liu from Explora Journeys. She's going to join us and tell us a little bit about Explora, a little bit about the topic, and to sort of kick off today's discussion. So welcome, Kathy, and thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you all for tuning in today to hear me speak, to hear Marguerite speak, and we're just so excited to do this. Yes, Explora Journeys is just a brand new company. We've just been out, and we are redefining ocean travel with our new luxury lifestyle, Ocean Brand, and we're scoring really, really high marks with our current guests. And on top of that, Travel and Leisure magazine just recognized Explora One with the privileged title of Best New Ship, launched in 2023, and Condé Nast Traveler included Explora Journeys in their 2024 hot list within the Best New Cruise in the World category. So that is just with one ship, and we are less than a year old. Later this summer, Explora 2 comes out, and she joins our growing fleet. I put that in air quotes because we only have one ship in the water right now, but by 2028, we will have 6 vessels in the water. What's also really cool is that, I have a really quick clip to show in a little bit, but, it'll highlight our brand pillars with space, choice, design, and of course, immersive journeys. That will just kind of encapsulate why we keep getting recognized. We keep having these really, again, high marks with our guests. And you know what? Let's go ahead and show this 30-second video. Right. So, we have the momentum, we have the availability to welcome your luxury clients to their homes at sea. And today, like I said, I am thrilled to be followed by our host of honor, Marguerite Scully, an Explora Journeys brand ambassador and an experienced luxury travel advisor who will discuss how to best match your luxury clients to the right vacation experience. So Marguerite, welcome.
You might be muted, Marguerite. Sorry.
So sorry. I was saying thank you, Kathy. I'm excited to be here with Explora, as I've been privileged enough to go already twice. And I've sold 10 of the top residents. 3 of the clients came off last fall and immediately rebooked. So they're joining you again this fall. So that always is exciting to be behind a product that clients are raving about and wanting to go again and again. So thank you.
And Kathy, I know there's a question in the chat that you might want to answer, but I know it's Explora specific question, so I'll leave that to you. But thank you, Kathy. Marguerite, again, I know we've introduced you before in this program. I just want to say before we kick off the discussion, thank you for your time. I know every single one of us is very busy in this industry, so we really do appreciate your time and your effort coming on this show this week.
Thank you. No, I love your talks. I think they bring a lot of value to advisors, and I'm very appreciative that you asked me back on.
So we had a discussion earlier in the week about today's episode. I thought it was really interesting something you said, and I was hoping we could use that to set the stage for the conversation. You mentioned like competing as a luxury travel advisor against new technology coming in the industry, and I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about who or what you think that your role now is competing against.
Yeah, so we know clients now have access to so much information, and whether that's the ChatGPT, social media. My favorite is when they come to me with, I saw this influencer on TikTok and I must go to this new hotel, or this destination's the hot thing for 2024. Or even a friend that they think they really know, oh, I must do this trip they just did. And as advisors, we know they're getting this information really quickly, and we too have to be quick with our turnaround time. But we have to remember luxury is customization. And with that, most of the time our clients come to us with the where they want to go, when they want to go, and they think we just do the how, right? But really, we should be finding the why. What's the meaning of the trip? We kind of talked about this last time, and who the client is. So I like to take time up front to connect to my client, because I do find all that information they're getting can be very overwhelming. I like to get on the phone. I'm old school. If they have some time for me, not just via email. But I think it's important for us to be advisors and not just an order taker, just try to go really quickly. Instead, our topic today is matching luxury clients with perfect vacations. And the only way I can do that is by taking that time. We said we call it dating the client, right? To better understand what speaks to them, not necessarily what they've been influenced by. So I do get asked a lot, and I being new in the industry only 2 years, they'll say, oh, do you specialize in something? And I don't necessarily want that. I don't want to be an expert in one destination. I really want to pride myself in specializing in the client.
Yeah. First of all, you mentioned the sales you had to explore, Marguerite, for 2 years in the industry. Just congratulations on that. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. You sort of set up this sort of battle between clients who want to make best use of their time, but also that you need to be sort of slow and methodical at first in order to maybe save time down the line. I think that's something advisors should remember or think too, that it might be a slow process at first for your client when you're qualifying them, when you're getting to know them, but that ultimately that's going to make the best use of that relationship down the line.
Right. By putting that time in upfront, what you just said, I think it makes a genuine connection, which we need. It allows for us to move faster in the future. And like anything else, having that strong foundation is important. And once I better understand the client's interests, their idea of what luxury is, what they value, then I can deliver a customized proposal much faster. I have better conversations with DMCs, how to match them with hotels, cruises, whatever product they're looking for, and even the right destination. I would say the best part is I can build several itineraries then based on their interests, and we switch that conversation from just one trip. Now we're just talking about anything in the future that might speak to them. I do think connection is a big word in travel. We hear it at Embark, where I work, at Virtuoso. And as advisors, we're taught we need to connect our clients to the places they go, the people they are with, themselves. And that's a big task, right? We have to create those opportunities for clients to experience memorable, meaningful, impactful moments. We sometimes have to slow them down. It's not just about the Instagrammable picture or what everybody else is doing. And in order to do that, we need to know them on a personal level. And I think we can't forget the genuine connection that is needed between an advisor and a client to deliver that perfect vacation.
All right. So that first conversation seems to be of the utmost importance to you in your workings, Marguerite.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of, you mentioned dating your client too, which I think is a really cool way to look at it. But what kind of open-ended questions can you ask to sort of start maybe getting to know them, to start pulling the information out that you need in order to best serve them?
Right. So I really like hearing, not only talking about this trip, but past trips, especially if it's a new client, gauging, ideas and dreams they may have. What did they really enjoy about that trip? I think if you listen for those clues, they'll tell you what hotel they were at. Was it sun and sand? Was it relaxation, high adventure? Is it something they want? Authentic experiences, privacy. And that will give you a better taste for their aesthetic, their price point, a pace of a trip by, being a good listener. I think that really helps. And sometimes the best part is seeing that maybe they're making a wrong choice. Maybe it's the wrong time of year. And I think that is important as advisors, that logistically, maybe it's difficult that time of year, or economically, maybe there's more value going at a different time. So I do think asking open-ended questions and figuring out what interests them, and again, the why of that trip, will really help you match them in the end to the right destination.
I'm just curious, like, how long is that typical initial phone conversation? Like, you said you like to dig in. You said you do like to get on the phone, which I know is obviously better than getting on email. Like, you mentioned the connection, it seems to be easier to make on the phone. Like, how long do those phone calls usually go?
It really can depend the
Yeah.
kind of client you have, how open they are to sharing. I think having it as organic as possible. I know I have colleagues that have a form that they like to fill out. I prefer listening and having that one-on-one conversation. And again, those conversations aren't just initial at the beginning, but throughout. And for me, I even love following up after a trip to learn things maybe they would have done differently. Every time you're speaking or seeing an email, trying to engage with your client to learn a little something new, I think it being organic is more genuine as well. But I do have clients who don't, as I say, they don't want to date me. And it really is just, here are the facts. And I will say it's not as successful. And I've had some clients that I've let go because of that, because we were not productive together.
Yeah, and we can talk about that, I think, in a little later too. Um, Also, so you mentioned sort of a client has an idea in their head and maybe it doesn't match what they want to match. You mentioned earlier in the week that as part of your philosophy is selling to the interests and hobbies of a client, maybe instead of a destination. Like, why they want to go to Rome or why they want to go to Paris, the why seems to be more important than the destination. Uh, Talk a little bit about that, about why those interests and hobbies might matter to your clients more than the specific place they have in mind.
Well, one, I think they will invest more. So it's a good way to have that conversation. If we're just picking going down a bucket list, they may not spend as much, but these experiences we're planning, I agree, it shouldn't just be about the destination. And when we find the ingredients of what the client is interested in, again, you can sell more than one trip and they would spend for that passion that they have. I think looking today, I know I'm speaking at Virtuoso about the differences of generations and selling to generations. And right now we're seeing a huge thing with younger generations with event-driven travel. This summer alone, we have everyone touring for concerts, trying to go see Taylor Swift. I have many clients taking their children to Taylor Swift all over the world. Or maybe it's sports, the Olympics, lots of golf, tennis, going to Wimbledon. So there is a group, once you know they're passionate about something, then you can discuss where can we now go because of that versus the other way. My clients are usually a lot into food. So somebody may just come and say, oh, I'm really excited to go to Italy, but I learn now, and forget ancestry. These are wonderful things too, but they're like, I love cooking. I really want to have my family experience this, the culture, through food. So then I can know you love food. That's a passion point. Have you thought of going to Lyon? Everybody thinks Paris, but Lyon in France, food capital. San Sebastian, Lima in Peru, Mexico City. Like the list can go on and on when we shift that conversation to make the experiences to their passion points and not just what a particular destination has to offer.
Okay, so find their passion points, find their why, find the reason, as opposed to simply wanting to check a destination off a bucket list, or like you mentioned, seeing a really fancy hotel or really beautiful photo on Instagram. Like find why specifically they want to do that. Like what's the accomplishment they're working towards.
Right. And I will say,
right.
going back to the time of it and trying to explain that to a client. And I know I shared that story where I did let someone go because he was taking his kids to a concert, and it was just, we need these hotels, I think, and I don't care how many nights. And I kept asking, well, to design this proposal, I need to know what you're really wanting to do in each destination and how we're moving through the trip and pacing it. But I don't think he thought I was wasting his time. And I will say everyone's time is valuable. Time is a gift, is what we are doing when we create these experiences. And we have to work together up front to do this. So their investment is something that they value and they find important. So, and I will also say on the flip side, Benjamin Franklin said best, time is money, right? I want to work efficiently and I don't want to dilute my bottom line. So I think by selling this way, you're opening yourself up to have much more success on that initial trip, but then be able to speak to turn the other trips around. We don't want a one and done. We want clients to return to us. And so I think you valuing your time and explaining to your customer, if they invest a little bit up front, how much more are they getting back in return?
Yeah, I love how you use the word invest. I think instead of spend, I think that's such a great way to look at it. But like it seems like what you're saying is, as just as the client is they're investing money in their vacation, you're also investing your time and energy in their booking, and you have to realize that you need your payoff too. You're not an order taker. You need to be able to work towards your goal as well.
Right. And I think because of the stress of how we just talked, like ChatGPT and people getting information so quickly, we sometimes forget this. And, I don't have a team yet. I know my business is growing very quickly. And my mentor has said, even this morning, I think you may need more help. But again, working as efficiently as possible and reminding ourselves, doing the work properly up front, taking a beat, not feeling overwhelmed. And I think we do start churning things out, and that's where we become those order takers. And sadly, I think if we want to show how we are indispensable, our value, how we will still be here in a few years, and that people need an advisor, we need to do this. We need to switch the thinking and not feel the pressure of constantly just, I got to do the next itinerary, another itinerary. That's a little too superficial, I would say.
All right, I think that's a great philosophy too, because I know advisors, maybe not now, but particularly when maybe business is slower, they're looking for numbers, looking for volume, and investing now seems to be paying off in the future. Like you mentioned some of your business up front, and I think that's a good way to look at it. I want to talk a little bit about actually designing these vacations, because that's part of the reason why we're here today. Pacing is really interesting. I've never had a discussion about pacing on this series before, and you when we spoke earlier in the week, you mentioned so much about pacing. I thought it was so interesting. So I'm curious. I mean, you're designing a trip. I know client by client or client group, but client group is going to be very different. But how do you pace a trip in order to really make your clients booking as best you can?
Right. So Daniel, as you said, depending on the client, their needs, how long they're going to be there, we have to know all of those things first. But really, as you all know, I'm an opera singer in my past. So I think of every trip as like going to the theater, right? And I want to make sure whatever they're doing, even if it's just they're staying for it's a long weekend, right? They're not going to be moving around, but opening night, it starts off with something really engaging, right? And I want to make sure that wow moment is at the beginning of a trip. And then understanding the pace that we can ebb and flow, that we're going to keep them excited with little experiences along the way, but then know at the end of the trip that we still need to end it. That's the grand finale, right? So I think it's hard sometimes if someone even calls, it's easy, I should say first, my clients who want that 2-week vacation, looking, or 3 or 5, which I can talk about in a minute. But when it is that long, like weekend getaway, to still apply that practice, that it's not just we have you at the best dinner tonight, we picked the right hotel, we got these extra amenities, and then we walk away. The client will be left not feeling as excited. So I do think spending some extra time, especially on those smaller trips, to figure out the pacing. I have clients who will come to me on the flip side and say, I only have 8 days, but they've just listed, I'm going to see Rome, Florence, Venice, and can we go to Amalfi? And I have to explain what a transfer would be, that you're losing time and that you will be tired. There'll be jet lag. So I think pace is the biggest way to sell to a client up front, to really walk them through what an itinerary actually would be, to understand how much balance and structure they want. Like in Europe, how many churches are we really going to? And, or castles, and how many museums do you need? So understanding that client and their needs and who's on this trip is very important. I would say that this is another great reason for pace, depending on who the client is, why you would sell a cruise. And that naturally, that pace can be built in. We talked about this of defining luxury. And in pace, we have to remember that luxury is lost a lot of the times when we are going through. If I have a client who is going to Europe and they've spent all this money on airfare and they're like, no, I must see, and they have a huge list. And we call that like the amazing race, like how many things are we going to check off? So for that client, I really want to make sure that they realize how many times we're getting on a train, we're getting on a ferry. And privately, we were talking before in this meeting, and I said, I have never been on a train or a plane that was as luxurious as my ocean day at sea when I was on Explora, and sitting by a pool and having someone serve me a pina colada while I'm tanning. It was very relaxing. And so that idea of pacing is naturally built in why I would sell a cruise, right? But I think it's very important to take control, be an advisor, and be able to really be thoughtful of what is this pace. I will say one other trip I had was they're an older couple. They went away for 3 weeks to Asia, and again, wanted to check off a lot, and it was doable. We could spend, I always say, 3 nights. If you're doing less than 3 nights, it's very difficult to enjoy anything, right? That's tight. But I was very particular about how early we were starting, whatever excursion it might be, and then to know tomorrow morning, what time are you getting picked up for the next transfer? Right. So if we had all these transfers, how are we doing it? How could it be an experience? How can it be more enjoyable to really let the client, again, I'm thinking of a show. Everything is a show to me. And so thinking, what is that pace throughout the show? Are you going to get fatigued? Will you be tired? That's our job, not, again, just to be the order taker and check off a million things on the list, and pacing for everyone. So depending for your family, that first day especially, I always try to have it be as light as relaxing, but a little something active, especially if they're trying to get over jet lag. But if it's multi-gen or someone with young children, you have to be very mindful throughout the trip, because no one will be happy when everyone gets tired. So
Okay. So I had a question. You mentioned take control, Marguerite. I imagine that's not always incredibly easy when you're speaking to maybe clients who haven't worked with you before, especially when they don't know like the experience they might be getting or the satisfaction they might be getting from you as an advisor. Yeah, is that difficult to take control when you are maybe dealing with a first client and they have these ideas in their head about what they want, what they could see, like what's all these possibilities that clearly might, be a drag on the actual vacation?
So most importantly, you must listen to your client. You want to hear out why they then want these things. And so then it's much easier to then have a conversation. And I was always taught to say, would you consider? And instead of saying, you're absolutely wrong, this is a horrible idea, But to say, would you consider, is a nice way to maybe switch the conversation. If I know that they have a certain amount to invest in a trip and it's not going to work, I've had clients who keep pushing, say, Japan, and Japan's still very high. To try to show value and maybe waiting another year or two, or maybe we don't take the whole family on this trip and that's a couple trip, or again, less stops. I think if we could just, you will have a better quality experience, again, by going through day to day and explaining what those times are before ever talking to the DMC and going to payment or anything, to really do that up front. I think it's just like when people have all that information. I said this, like they go to the doctor and they're like, oh, I think I have this, this, and this. Well, the doctor then has to do the diagnosis. And so that's for us, listening, understanding what they really need, and have that proper conversation. I did have a client that wanted Switzerland, and she told me all the ingredients, everything she was looking for, but the price I knew was going to come high because that is on the Swiss franc. And so the euro, I said, would you consider going to Slovenia? It's a destination you may not have ever thought of. But again, that's our job as an advisor, to give options. And so to say, maybe consider something completely different, the value will be more, and you're doing the same things. There is hiking, there is the lake, there's cooking, everything they wanted to experience that could still happen, but on the euro. I would say the same would be true for a cruise. You can experience Europe, but on the American dollar by going on a cruise. So giving these options, I think, is a really good way, and it shows, again, our value as an advisor.
So that's a great, have you considered or would you consider is the way to do that. All right. So you mentioned the pace, you sort of mentioned programming. That seems like a battle to me too, like balancing over programming in your head with your clients' expectations with the experience you know they're going to have when they are traveling. I mean, is it again just a point of getting to know your clients, Marguerite, and just making sure that if you do maybe move more programming in the trip, you know that they're going to be comfortable with it, or is it just making them aware of it? Like, what's sort of the philosophy there?
So, I mean, I think, as I said, I've been trained at Embark. I went through this mentor program. I will tell you, some of these topics we have 2-hour trainings on, just a question you're asking. But it was drilled into me of really think length of stay. And within length of stay, what is this client wanting to do? And no more than 2 activities in a day. And that can even be a lot to understand. Again, that would be that pace throughout, and that to really say, okay, I know you want 8 days, but where are we spending our 8 days? What are you wanting to do in those 8 days? And a lot of the times they just get excited and it's the cart before the horse. You have to slow them down and discuss what are the highlights, and for all the family, right? Because again, you have to think who is on this trip. Working with the DMC is great. I learned a very big lesson. I have a large family. They're adults, 6 people going to Switzerland, and 2 siblings, their spouses and their parents. I had one lead, and that was the person who I was the contact, getting all the information through. All of a sudden, the sister starts chiming in. Now dad's coming in, and they keep adding and adding and adding. Well, the DMC hates me. I will be at this point, because I've had to go back and forth. So again, that's another lesson of when you're working with one family and a parent is easy. When you now have multi-gen or these adults, my Gen Z with baby boomers, like it can be a lot. And being able to sure you're hearing everyone's voice first, really being thoughtful about that program before working with the DMC, and to make sure, again, are they going to come away feeling they had a vacation, or will they just be like, what were we like? That was way too much. But my biggest lesson also is I have to sometimes allow the client to do that and make those choices. And when we follow up after, usually that is when 9 times out of 10, a client will say, well, you're right. We probably didn't need to go to so many places. And now we have established that. I have a little more trust, and next time maybe they'll listen.
What I'm curious, what happened with the family? I mean, that seems like a lot. It seems like to be getting communication from 5 or 6 different people with maybe 5 or 6 different wants and needs. Like, how did that end up?
Well, they haven't gone yet, so I'm hoping it's going to be great. But it is a lot to manage and try to take back control. And I mean, now everybody's on one email, and I very meticulously went through. I mean, they're going to go to Glen Eagles and even the hotel planning all these activities. I had to explain to them, you're going to have to give up something, or you can't all do it together. And maybe that's okay. Maybe one husband wife really wants this hike and a picnic while somebody else wants spa time. Like, we can make it work, but it can't necessarily always be together. So you do have to just be practical and say, this is our timeline. These are when these are in, the experiences can happen, and how then put the puzzle together. But I do think as an advisor, we want to try to get that conversation, provide the information, be thorough, and then go to the hotel, the concierge, a DMC with it. So there's not a lot of back and forth. I did learn that very quickly.
All right. So destination, you mentioned the Switzerland, booking you had, Slovenia, but initially they wanted Switzerland, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. How are those conversations? Because again, like you mentioned, clients get an idea in their head, whether they see it on social media or they read it somewhere, or they see a film or a movie that sort of makes them start dreaming about this place. But people, your clients, Marguerite, are they generally open to switching destinations as long as sort of like we spoke about, like the wants or the whys are met? Like, is that a more difficult conversation to have?
I will be honest, I'm lucky in the sense of the type of client I have is my age, older, and slightly younger. So I would say I don't have a lot of the Gen Z. I get Gen Z when it's multi-gen trips with like the baby boomers and going across the generations. So I think they're a little more receptible, I should say, to maybe being open to the destination, because I think in that the older generation sometimes just really care about, okay, I know I want luxury and I want to please my family. I know I want to enjoy myself. And I think they respect the value of, why am I shifting to say Switzerland to Slovenia? Again, it's like, for my client, I am looking at them and their year of travel, sometimes a year and a half out. So I feel like I'm almost like a financial advisor to them. And I think they respect that. So I'm looking to see, how can we, again, I don't want to sell one trip. I want to sell multiple trips. So how can I bring the value? It's still going to be luxury. It's still going to be, again, those ingredients that they're looking for, and be able to then to continue to spend. I do think some of my younger clients may just want, and I've had this happen where I had a younger client and she's actually on Explora right now with her mother. But she went for her honeymoon and she wanted to go to India. She saw that I was there and, reached out, and she's working on creating her platform on Instagram. She's writing a book about a jet setter's lifestyle for children. She was trying to get content. And she told me, I have to go to this particular hotel in Jaipur. And I said, I was just there. Maybe you could consider one of these other two hotels, as I think the location for everything you want to do would be better. And we could set up lunch at this property. And because I know it's something that has been used, the DMC and I even talked about, that it had been used. A lot of influencers had gone, it makes great content. It makes for a great picture. But is that, for myself as the advisor, did I think she was going to enjoy the experience at the hotel? Well, I have to listen to her. We finalized it. That is where she stayed. And when she came home, she did tell me, I wish I had only had your advice and had lunch and a photo shoot there. It was more remote. She said there was problems with like just smell of sewage and, all of these things that I tried to explain. You're away from the city center. You're away from this structure of what you may think is luxury and the needs you want. So now, again, she did it. And now she's on Explora Journeys with her mother, because I explained, I think getting around, taking your mom, another thing that's great for cruising. She is a heavy traveler. She calls herself a maximalist. She loves her things and she brings a lot of suitcases, her outfits. She's trying to create content. She's a very fun person. So I said, if you're really trying to go around and see all of these destinations, I think a cruise would be perfect. And in fact, you had that article this past week about why take a cruise and let Americans know. And that idea of unpacking one time, she is not a cruiser. She had not been on a cruise. She saw that I was on the Explora back in January with my mother. We started having conversation. She's like, I'm seeing a lot of press. Please tell me why I should do this. And I think as advisors, we get that from clients. You know, when we ask them to consider something else, we have to know why. So I have to know my client. And I gave her the reason of, you want to bring all your things. Just imagine how that's going to be. And again, value. She's somebody who comes from a travel background. Her mother did work in hotels. So, you know, explaining that you're buying this up front and that this is the American dollar, you know what you're investing. There will no surprises. Your food, your alcohol, the excursions even can all be planned. And so for someone like her, that now we've built that trust that she was able to then say, okay, I want to do Explora. And yesterday, as I said, I got a text. She was blown away. She had just stepped on the cruise. She hadn't even gone into her suite. And which, by the way, Explora is all suites. But she hadn't even, just the experience of seeing the lobby is like nothing else. So I think it's important to take control and give other suggestions to clients.
Yeah, again, I imagine like packing up the equivalent of a walk-in closet, you know, going from city to city. Again, you mentioned time as a resource. That seems like a large amount of time to be able, and you know, having that opportunity to do that on an Explorer, like on a ship like Explorer, would seem like a big drawing point.
Yes.
And yeah, it was interesting. We were speaking before we went live today, Marguerite, and I asked if maybe it was this client or another client, but if they were gonna cruise again in the future, if you think that sell was going to be easier, and you said absolutely.
Absolutely. Because, you know, you just kind of touched on something of, you know, keeping luxury, we're matching the right vacation. So Explora, and there's, you know, it's not just Explora. I'm very excited to have Explora in my pocket now as a new luxury cruise line. But to know what aesthetically a client wants. So it's checking the box, right? And so right now, yes, she's on a cruise. And going forward, she's going to realize she's going to now compare this. I mean, it's just starting. And during this, you know, I think it's a 9-day voyage, she's going to then see how much more relaxing it is and what you just said of time. So I do think when you're on a cruise, besides unpacking one time, that gift of time that really a cruise is giving you and keeping the state of luxury. I was talking about the ferry for the one family in Greece. I was really concerned. This woman, she's young, she's a widow, 2 little kids. I got her VIP meet and greet everywhere. But once you go to a ferry, if you've sold Greece, and I love Greece, but all luxury is gone. We are now the big cattle call, going up the ramp, you know, pulling the luggage, running to get it on, you know, the rack. And I said, that's difficult, right? And so that loss of a day and the stress that you have, something like a cruise, which now she will experience. So I do say once a client is on a cruise, they tend to immediately want to go back, which again, I started the conversation with. I had 3 people on Explora in the fall going from Canada to New York, and they came off, and they're very demanding clients, very VVIP clients, ultra luxury. And they said immediately, please put us back. Where are we going next? They chose a warmer destination. They're going to be doing Barcelona because they want to experience the pools. Because I will say, Explora has 4 amazing pools. And that is part of the charm. I've been on it in the Caribbean, and now I've been on it in Vancouver to LA. And I will say that being able to enjoy the outdoor space on Explora is a plus for sure.
All right, so we only have a few minutes left, Marguerite. If anyone has any questions, I see Kathy's still hanging around too. If anyone has questions for Kathy or Marguerite, please drop them in the chat, and we'll get to them. I do want to ask, you mentioned you're doing the generations talk, Marguerite. And again, I don't want to have your whole couple-hour presentations on here. I have a question I would love to ask later. But one thing, I was hoping you could share another story with us that you mentioned me earlier in the week. You mentioned you had family with all different interests, and you were able to discover sort of each passion for each person. And I thought that was an incredible story for advisors to take note of. I had the quote you told me. You said planning an itinerary is very difficult to really deliver unless you know their passions, what's their why. And I was hoping you could maybe share that story if it rings a bell with us too.
Oh, definitely. So I have a client that has younger preteen and teenage children. I do love something about COVID brought Americans to really discover America and not necessarily traveling far and wide. So they're still doing this, and they are wanting, especially their son, to get off electronics. So I know why they want to go to these national parks and really try to have bonding time and just kind of turn off everything. But learning about the client and the children, because it is important, again, to sell to everyone. I know that the son is a swimmer. And I know the daughter's horseback riding. I know the father loves golf, the mom spa, and they love good dining. So again, where can we go? And that's what she said. Where are we going? So again, back to it's a show. I have them flying into San Francisco, so they will have a city experience to start. The kids get to go to Alcatraz and good dining, and then they're gonna go off to Yosemite. That's when it's going to change. Luxury is different, but it's going to still be luxury in the sense they're in a nice lodge, but the activities that they're wanting to do, it's the best guides, the best of what we can find there, and what they wanted, the why of the trip, to tune out and not be on electronics and get, come back together, connecting with each other. And then we're ending with Carmel Valley Ranch. So I know we talked about luxury. As advisors, we really need to know our product and how we can shift and move something. I really like not asking, what is the price point per night? Because if you have an overall investment, you then know how to sprinkle it out. And so we are doing a bigger spend at the end at Carmel Valley Ranch. And there I have the son doing a private surf lesson. I mean, they live in New Jersey area, so they usually go to the shore, and he's done that a couple of times, but he's so excited to go surfing in California. The daughter simultaneously is going to be a private horseback riding on the beach. So something for her, whale watching for the family, fishing for the dad. Their dad and son are doing golf. The mom has a spa. So like, again, that idea of there's something for everyone throughout the trip. It's not all on one day. And making sure the last night is, I always say, like, what's the best restaurant? What's something for them? They love, like, pizza night is their tradition. Like, so I try to keep that turning into, it's still their family and how they're connecting, even when they're in a different destination. So, I mean, I think I like it. It's my passion to try to match that perfect vacation to that client, but really to do it, you have to take time. And then I know we kind of talked about this, is trust. And once they come back, this client, this is maybe my third trip, she at this point trusts me. She's like, where are we going now? What's next? And they're excited to hear my ideas. And I think for us, having that genuine conversation, expressing interest in your client, I always say, no, small talk is never small. We learn so much. But really, when they come back, they realize that trust is gained for us to have more work from them, but also referrals. And I do think having that trust, that catalyst for them to then talk about the amazing trip, that's how I built my business so quickly in a year. But I do think that should be our cornerstone of really trying to connect from advisor to client and building that trust.
Yeah, I just think it's incredible. Like you spoke about, you compared sort of your job in these bookings or these vacations as acts in a play, things like that, and like the small storylines for each individual seems like it fits in that kind of way. Like you want the group to celebrate together, but you also want them to have their own time to pursue their passions that might be very singular to them. I think that's such an incredible way of looking at it. And also, Marguerite, like I know you mentioned earlier in the week, one quote you said was, "I don't want my job to be boring," or I don't want my job to be monotonous or boring." And I think your philosophy, like it really lends itself to how you are able to connect with your clients too, because you want to pursue that passion you have for this career, and that sort of leads to be able to go above and beyond for your clients.
I could not say it better. And I think I felt when I started, I was selling, and I'm sure like many young advisors, new advisors, that you get a lot of requests for Europe, and it's Greece and it's Italy and it's France. And for myself, it was like, okay, but I can't wait to sell India. I can't wait to sell Asia. Again, I'm wanting to, where I mentioned before, if you know that client and you know what they are passionate about, whether it could be wellness, what kind of, where are we now going to do that? And so I just think that makes it much more exciting. And again, your book of business will grow. You can sell and continue to sell to that client based off of their passions, their interests. And again, they usually spend more. They're willing to invest in their passion.
Yeah. Earning the trust. So just, I guess, a little recap. slow down initially, think of the pacing, don't be afraid to take control from your client, and earning that trust is going to be really, really important. We spoke about cruising already, Marguerite. I mean, is there anything else you want to add? I know, like we spoke about, once you get someone on a cruise, or especially a luxury cruise, like we have Explora here, obviously Explora, but there's other lines too. It seems to be sort of a shoe in to make a future booking. Have you ever had to has there been a surprising case where a client maybe didn't, or maybe a client who was against cruising fell in love with cruising? Like, is that something that's common with you and your clients?
A client who did not want to go on a cruise,
Yeah,
went on a
because I
cruise
know, like
and right.
you mentioned consumer media, and I know there's been a lot of articles about cruising. It seems to be the ire of some consumer editors. But I know, again, like we mentioned, that once you get someone on a cruise, it's leads to another booking down the line. But I'm just wondering if there ever was a difficult sell to get someone on a cruise, maybe someone who loved FITs, who loved land vacations, things like that.
No, I mean, I think again, when I had the conversation, I would say we know how hard it is for logistics to put everything together when we have larger groups. And so that is something I always think about, even no matter what age. And again, there's multiple cruise lines, different points that we talked about of luxury. So as an advisor, we're required to know a lot. We have to know what our product is and how that matches to our clients' needs. But I do think suggesting cruising for people that are in groups, think about how much easier asset advisors taking over that trip is, designing that trip, because the logistics of moving the group around. And again, the conversation I just told you, the vacation this summer for this family, I have something for everyone. When I sell the cruise, that naturally happens. No matter it's multi-gen group or just within a group, everyone the same age getting together. People like going at different paces. So once you provide something where they can be together and you've taken out all the pressure of how are we going to fit this all in within 8 days, 10 days, 2 weeks, or even 3 days, these cruises can give that option. So I think that's smart to think outside the box, and it is much easier to control than what you are selling. Because I do think logistically, you have a lot of moving parts, the more people you have, even within a family, but to make everyone happy, a ship is a place where, again, depending on the dining they want, different excursions, even, there are different levels of excursions, or someone doesn't want to go on an excursion and they just want to sit by a pool, but somebody else wants to be really active and go to a city. Well, it's very hard to meet all those demands, but if you say cruise, that checks all the boxes. So I do think having that conversation, I think knowledge is power, and getting that to the client. And again, if you can get them on and understand the value of why they will have a great experience and this is a great vacation for them, they will go again.
All right, so I'm gonna grab this last question in the chat, and then we're gonna wrap up. And Margaret, I know this might be a big question, and again, like you mentioned, we could have a 2-hour discussion, sort of all the points we made today. And this might be another one of them. But Lori asks, just about attracting your first luxury client. And I know we don't have a lot of time, but are there any tips, any guidance you can give us on just breaking into the luxury travel space?
So, yes, I would say I'm very fortunate because I live in Washington, D.C. I live in an affluent area. So I think it is harder for clients who live maybe in a suburb or may not want to be as social. I literally, as you can see, will talk to anybody. I have a gift for gab. My mother hates this comment, but Jack Ezon at Embark always said, like, go where your client is, right? So you have to put yourself out there. Where is the client you want? And that could be a mom group. That could be a guy at the golf course. That could be, for me, I go to nice restaurants. My husband and I don't have children, and we do tend to sit at the bar. So when I make a joke saying I pick up my clients at the bar, granted, they're chef tables. They're very elegant places that I'm sitting. And I even this week just picked up a client, and it's just by having, again, that organic, genuine conversation, that small talk. And people love talking about themselves. That's the great thing about open-ended questions. I heard him talking about a wine, but then they were talking about another restaurant. And so for me, I picked up many of my clients. I put myself out there in my community with the client I wanted. So I went to women in wine groups. Out at dinner, I always have my card with me. I even have picked up a client waiting for luggage. I was in Greece and we were standing there for about 30 minutes. They were actually about to go on a cruise. They did not work with an advisor and we were chatting. And then when they were on this cruise, it was not Explora, this cruise got stranded. And he called me and goes, I don't know, I bet you're surprised that I'm calling you, but everyone who had an advisor were able to get off the ship, had their flights booked, and have credits. I was by myself. I realize now I thought I loved doing this on my own, but I did not like being on my own when I was stranded in Mykonos. So I think 1, be prepared, always have your card, but 2, put yourself where you want your client. Who is your client? Go there, find that person, be willing to talk and have conversation.
Well, I think we're going to end there. First, I want to thank you, Marguerite. Again, this is your second time doing this. It's always so insightful and so fun talking to you. So I really do love having you on, and we really do appreciate all your time too.
Thank you. I too. I am very honored to be back for a second time. Thank you.
And I also want to thank Kathy too for joining us today and for sticking around and hearing me and Marguerite talk to each other too. I really appreciate all your time and support, Kathy.
No, thank you, and it's great. And I do want to just put a plug in there saying that you are the advisor. You know, everyone on this chat, everyone that's participating, you're the advisor, and lean into that, and don't be afraid. You know, and build the relationship with your rep, because that goes a long way as well.
And last but not least, thanks everyone for coming out today. Again, we'll be back August 1st, definitely, maybe something in July. So just keep an eye on your email inbox. But until then, I hope everyone stays safe and stays healthy. And yeah, we'll see you all pretty soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.